Ricardo Menendez-Marsh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have more in common with asylum seekers and migrant workers than we do with billionaires and politicians on the other side of the House who seek to divide our communities and hand out billions of dollars to landlords, the fossil fuel industries and the tobacco industries. This is a Trojan horse of a bill, because for all the virtuous signaling that we have heard from the previous members, the reality is that this bill diminishes the rights of migrants, and it also expands the liability of deportation for migrant communities. It also keeps painting refugees as though they are a security threat. So when we hear narratives about the integrity of our immigration system and how important it is to Manaki migrants, why don't these politicians, from whichever side of the House they come from, focus on genuinely improving the human rights of migrants, which, by the way, are not even recognized adequately in our Immigration Act, because the policies that come out of the Immigration Act are effectively exempt from the Human Rights Act. Migrants are actually not protected in legislation when it comes to the human rights adequately. And so it's really important to put it on the record that what this bill does is it creates additional tools for the minister to effectively deport migrants. And to say that this is about protecting migrants by, adding an additional charge for charging premiums offshore and criminalizing that, while at the very same time gutting the support that exploited migrants can receive, is a joke. This is not a government that takes migrant exploitation seriously, because if they did, they would not have been cutting the length of time that someone can be on the migrant exploitation protection visa. Simply not a serious government when it comes to migrant exploitation and treating our migrant communities with the respect and dignity that they deserve. On the government side, we have had the New Zealand First Party scapegoating migrant communities left, right and centre. In fact, their whole fuck-up of a party has been on scapegoating migrant communities. On the other one, we have had the ACT Party, who has continuously scapegoated refugees and painted them as a security threat. And then we've got National, who have not hesitated to using the language of the far right when it comes to opening the floodgates and their language. And I do want to say I'm incredibly disappointed that the Labour Party continues to support this kinds of legislation. But then again, I remember that as the Greens, we have been fighting against unjust deportations, whether it's a Labour or National government. The truth is that this came off the back of a mass arrivals bill that was not supported by human rights organizations, introduced by the previous Labour government, who refused to listen to the voices of human rights organizations who said, why this bill? And they said, because we've got to prepare. In the same way, the government side has said, we have got to prepare for mass arrivals. But you know what they have not prepared for? Our underfunded health system, our education system that is struggling to keep up the needs of students, our public housing stock. They prefer to use slogans of getting prepared for mass arrivals by boats or planes that have never happened and have not been able to be substantiated as an imminent threat. But the things that we do know we have to prepare for, they have failed to adequately resource. They have gutted our public housing infrastructure. They have gutted the ability for us to have interregional rail so that we can connect our towns and cities. Instead, they have given billions of dollars to the wealthy few and the companies that are wrecking our environment and our planet. If they are so serious about preparing for the actual risks that our country faces, they would be turning their heads to issues around infrastructure and the cost of living and the climate crisis. Not this bill that seeks to continue treating migrant communities as a security threat when most asylum seekers are actually lacking adequate support for them to be adequately settled in our communities. And to use one horrid attack in West Auckland as the one example to justify stripping residency from asylum seekers is honestly disgusting, because we saw charities on the ground as well as advocates, including a former Labour Party MP from a refugee background, who at the time rightfully pointed out that that attack should absolutely not be used to diminish the rights of asylum seekers. And what do we have now? A bill that seeks to strip residency status from people who may have sought asylum if they are deemed to be a security threat. And when we talk about a security threat, it's also disingenuous for the government members to point to issues around terrorism. Again, pretending that refugees pose as a terrorist threat to our country. The definition of security in our legislation also includes issues in relationship to reputational damage effectively to our country, which could be weaponized against our communities. And we have seen that in the past in the way that Black and Middle Eastern communities have been weaponized and targeted by politicians on the other side of the house. And not that long ago in the previous national government, we saw an opposition that was also quite willing to scapegoat Asian communities for a housing crisis that we were experiencing. The political football of targeting migrants and refugees and using that as a distraction to not deal with the serious issues that we had at the time, right? Housing, like healthcare, that is actually supported by countless of migrant workers who simply want to be treated with respect and dignity and yet are experiencing unsafe staffing conditions. Additionally, this bill seeks to try and remediate the cuts that the government has made to our public services like health and education by charging migrants levies without recognizing that migrant workers already contribute disproportionately so to the tax base and to the services that we all need and use. Why? Because migrants, especially in the first few years of being here in this country, are unable to access many of these services that we all need, yet they're contributing in tax. Now the government, after cutting our healthcare system, after gutting our infrastructure and instead passing that on to the wealthy few, have chosen to put in place levies. And it's interesting that Casey Costello, who tends to just use Philip Morris's lines, says repetition, when actually in her contributions in relationship to this bill, she has failed to own up to the fact that her own leader has had a career of scapegoating migrants and refugees, and all that she has said during her contributions has been slogans and completely frivolous contributions that do not address the issues in front of us. It's actually disgusting that we have a New Zealand First Party that is quite happy to form a coalition with the National Party who shows up to ethnic communities events and does not own up to the fact that they have decided to form an agreement with the most anti-migrant, anti-refugee party in this parliament. The Green Party, instead of causing division by targeting migrant communities, is committed to taxing the wealthy few so that we can all have dignified lives, so that we can fund our public services that our communities need, instead of charging levies through this bill to make up for the cuts that they have made because they have realized that they're now having to make up for the shortfall due to the billions of dollars they have handed out to landlords, the tobacco company, and the fossil fuel industries. And when it comes to electronic monitoring, easy to say that it's a better alternative to detention when it comes to mass arrivals, when it was, once again, parties on both sides who supported having a mass arrivals regime. We tried to add additional protections for people subjected to electronic monitoring during the Committee of the Whole House stage. We tried to put an amendment to exempt children from being subjected to electronic monitoring, and that was not supported by the government side. And what that tells me is that they seem quite happy to have children escaping some of the most harrowing conditions that one can ever imagine being subjected to policies like electronic monitoring. This government paints these issues of asylum seekers as though we are receiving a huge amount of asylum-seeking claims. But last year, Mr. Speaker, we had one asylum-seeking case per 10 days. That's a tiny fraction compared to the claims that countries like Canada, the US, and the UK see. Extremely small amount compared to others. And so what we have as a country instead is an opportunity to boost the support systems and the judiciary, who can often help process those very same claims so that asylum seekers can be processed in a dignified manner, as opposed to pushing forward legislation that simply increases the liability of deportation and pretends that the government cares about migrant exploitation when every other action that they have taken tells us the exact opposite. For example, they could have decoupled work visas from single employers to give migrant workers better mobility for when they are in exploitative situations, and they have chosen not to do so. Once again, the Green Party will keep fighting to hold both major parties to account for their policies on immigration and their track record of, when things get tough, pointing the finger at migrants instead of addressing the reality that we've got billionaires hoarding up a stupid amount of wealth at the expense of our communities and property speculators who continue making a buck while people go without. The Green Party does not support this bill and will fight to overhaul our immigration system so that it genuinely puts human rights at the center of decision making.
Dr. Parmjit Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know which bill that member was talking about, but I'm taking this call on Immigration, Fiscal Sustainability and System Integrity Amendment Bill. And Mr. Speaker, I'm taking this call on behalf of ACT to support this bill. And we know, Mr. Speaker, that immigration is important to our nation, but immigration doesn't mean open borders for anyone or everyone. And I know that is what the Green Party wants, open borders for anyone and everyone. They don't care about national security. They don't care about safety of our communities. They don't care about immigration system supporting our economic activity. They don't care about those things. All they want is...
Point of order, Ricardo Mendes-March.
Offence at the imputation we don't care about national security.
You can't
I take offence at the comment.
You can't take personal offence on behalf of a group of people.
I take personal offence. I'm part of the group that was mentioned.
Wait, what is it? I'll just take some advice from the clerk. Okay, so the advice I have received is that because this is a wide-ranging debate, and the member himself has been wide-ranging in his comments as well in terms of his references to other political parties, that is also afforded to other political parties to be wide-ranging. But I would ask the House to not be personal in your comments. Dr. Parmjit Palmer.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, resuming from where I left, Mr. Speaker, we do really care about national security. We care about supporting our economy, and we do care about supporting our community. And we want to see that our immigration system is healthy, that is not compromising safety of communities or safety of our nation. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, we want to see that our borders are managed in a way we need to. We are learning new things in the immigration system, and we know that people are applying different kinds of mechanisms. They are becoming really innovative to dodge the system. And so we have to keep up, and we have to make sure that our legislation is able to keep up as well. And that is why this bill is so important. Mr. Speaker, the other thing the Green member spoke about is the exploitation visa. He is concerned about exploitation visa, but on this side, we are trying to stop exploitation. We are actually working on the root problem rather than create the problem and then see how we can solve that problem which has been created, and let that problem be created even at a bigger scale. We don't want that problem to be created at a bigger scale, but we want to see that we are minimizing that problem, and that is why, Mr. Speaker, we are ensuring that this bill goes through, which is about the integrity of our immigration system. And yes, policies are great, good policies are good, but if there are no compliance checks, there is no point having good policies. And that is why we have put some provisions in this for compliance checks as well. But yes, of course, for out-of-hours warrants, for compliance checks, there is going to be additional oversight through this legislation. Final point, Mr. Speaker, I want to make, I'm not going through all the changes that this bill is making. The other point which I'm really happy to see in this bill is that we know that a lot of people, those who use or misuse our immigration system to bring people from overseas, those who really want to be here in New Zealand, they can't come through the normal legal channels. And so they are enticed to pay for a job offer which doesn't exist. So these people, those who pay for this job, come here to New Zealand, they are not filling the genuine gap that we have in our businesses. They are here as surplus people, Mr. Speaker, I would say, because they just want to be here in New Zealand. And we want to stop that activity, charging premium, whether it happens here or it happens overseas. That needs to be stopped. And we want to see that our immigration system is bringing people, those who are genuinely filling the gap in our economic activity. So overall, Mr. Speaker, I would say it's a great bill. And any party that cares about our immigration system being a sound system should support this bill. ACT Party is really happy to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.